Good evening, everyone. I want to respect your time tonight and get going here and dive into some beautiful content that we know you'll be blessed by. I know that because I've been hanging out with the speaker for a long time now, and rarely a day goes by that I don't have gained some insight about this disease, yes, but really how to love more effectively and be more effective in our work, which we experience as our ministry, our calling here on the Hill. My name is Patrick Pingle. I'm the CEO. I've been here at Hubbard Hill for a little over 20 years and 32 years in senior care. And I'm going to introduce Debbie Carriveau to those. It'll be a little shorter because I know many of you have met her or heard her talk, have listened to the podcast perhaps. If you haven't, you want to make sure that you go to our website and get connected to that. It's a goal that we've had, that Deb and I have had for many, many years, to be able to touch more lives, to get the news out there, to be able to walk with people in this journey. And, technology allows that to happen. It's a pretty amazing thing, isn't it? So this Caregiver Forum tonight is one of a handful of Caregiver Forums that we have through the year that we go a little deeper and a little broader than the podcasts in one sitting. And you get to have some interaction. So in my quest to serve people who are suffering from dementia and the families who were touched by this disease, I quickly developed this very healthy dissatisfaction with the way things are in the world, in our industry. Quite frankly, I was mortified. I was troubled deeply. I really was asking myself, can I remain in this work because we're doing such a poor job? And part of that is because the caregivers didn't understand what they were doing. Not their fault. It's, as you all know, you're here because you've been touched by this in some way. You know that it's brutally hard, it's complex, that you can get 1,000 answers from every source, that every unique person is unique in their journey and in their diagnosis, and it looks different. But there's some people, and I went in search of those people, who really embraced this and didn't in our industry. And I was in search of that when I ran into Deb, and she was trying to share this message with a number of healthcare professionals. And I ran up to her afterwards in an event like this and said, you got it. You're speaking this language that I've never had. I know this is broken, but I didn't know how to change it. And so we became friends at that point, and I became a pupil of Deb's. And then eventually coaxed her to come join the Hubbard Hill team. And then we built together the Living Wisdom Center for Dementia Care. And it was quite a journey. It was a moment that we actually felt like we made a difference in the whole world. And people from around the world are coming to see the Living Wisdom Center for Dementia Care, because it's uniquely different. It's a combination of competent staff who know what they're doing, leadership, program, and the perfect environment. If there is such a thing. There is no such thing as a perfect environment, but many of the important elements for people to thrive. I'm not here for a commercial for the Living Wisdom Center. We knew that we had done something special, and if you haven't been around it, you should please take time to come over and tour. But that said, we wanted to do so much more at Hubbard Hill. We wanted to be a resource, a light, where people could come and learn and get support, education, and where we could minister and walk with you and be just available to you. And that looks like many different things. One thing that looks like is just being able to talk. So tonight you're going to experience a conversation between Deb and Christine, and I'll let Deb introduce Christine a little bit more. You can make your way up here now. But Deb is a professional in this industry. She's committed her life to it. She's been engaged in lifting the banner of excellence in care and design and innovation. And we're just blessed to have her here. So without further ado, Debbie Carriveau. Oh.
Well, good evening. I'm sure that most of you know Christine by career path and reputation, but this is Christine Karsten, and Christine is our partner in our caregiver blogs series that we're doing, as well as in our caregiver forums. And so we are just so privileged to have her come partner with us and be a part of getting the word out and sharing with people all the information that we have to share. As Patrick referred to, this journey of being with a loved one who's experiencing this illness of dementia is a very challenging one, to say the least. And so our goal in all of these caregiver forums are to just try to universally share information, give people helpful hints, try to share with people ways to survive this journey, because it is very, very difficult. A few years ago, beyond just my professional career path, I experienced what it was like to be on the other side of that as a family caregiver. Because my father was diagnosed and passed away with what was known as a combination dementia. So we have things to share from both sides of this journey. And so I'm just so glad to have you all here, and just if you'll help me welcome Christine and just let her know how glad we are to have her with us, that'd be great.
Well, I'm thankful to be here, and I'm learning with you. You know, I got to meet a couple of you as I walked in, and you said to me, we are in the early stages of this, and I am too. And that's kind of why I got brought in a little bit, so I could hopefully ask questions through our vlog that we do that maybe you're asking at home. And by the way, if you guys have anything that you're going through that we haven't touched on, this is all for you. So if you want to touch on a topic, let us know, because that's what Deb is here for, and that's what our platform is for you all about. So today I'm excited though, because we're really talking about how to create more positive days. And so no matter where you are in your journey, I know that can be difficult, right? It's like, what is the magic potion to this? And you know, Deb's been through this, you guys have. I have not at this stage, so I can only imagine what you're going through. And so I think just these positive days are really what a lot of people are fighting for.
Right.
So where do we get started, right?
So our topic tonight we're calling Living Their Truth. Probably one of the most challenging things that we deal with as we're on this dementia journey is starting to understand and realize that people that we love who are dealing with this disease process do not have the same sense of reality as the rest of us. And so one of the challenges as a caregiver is, how do we figure out a way to come alongside that person? How do we relate to them? How do we connect to them when their sense of reality is completely different than ours? Yeah.
So that's kind of where we're going to start, right? So first things first, those who have dementia don't realize they have dementia. And so that is really hard to wrap your head around. As you're living it every day, you're very well aware that they have dementia. So before we kind of dive in more, let's just start there. What's happening in their brains to not know that they have dementia, and what's affecting them when it comes to dementia?
So one of the things that happens that is a primary change, and one of the things that influences that person's ability to realize they have dementia, is that one of the primary things that are initially affected is my ability for what we call short-term memory. So the fact that somebody can tell me I have dementia, but I'm not going to remember that. So people don't have the ability to hear that information that I have dementia and then be able to process what that means or understand what that means. As many of you have experienced, frequently, their reality is, I'm fine, it's everybody else that has the issue, right? It's you, not me, right? And so it's that reality that we all know what's going on. We all care for this person and love this person with the anticipation that we know changes are coming. But they don't know that. They don't necessarily have an awareness of that unless they're very, very, very early in the process. The other thing that happens as the brain is being impacted by the dementia disease, depending on what kind of dementia they're diagnosed with. If you think about our brains like an onion, if you will, and we all start our lives and start building the core of our onion. Those things in the middle or core of that onions are those things that we learned very early in childhood. How to walk, how to talk, potty training, yes, no, mom, dad, peers. Those are the things that are in the very core of our onion. And then over all the years of our life, we're building layer on layer on layer of that onion. And in every layer is all the skills, abilities, relationships, memories, all those things that we have in each of those years of our lives are building up in those layers. Now, all of a sudden, whatever our outermost layer of the onion is whatever we're experiencing right now at this moment in time. So for all of you, it's being here tonight, it's listening to us, it's this experience is part of what's on your outermost layer of the onion. Then all of a sudden dementia comes along and dementia starts ripping those layers off one at a time. And what happens is how the brain's being impacted globally, all those things that are changing are taking away those skills, abilities, memories, whatever I experience in my layer that's currently being impacted by my disease process. So frequently what happens is as people's dementia progresses, their sense of reality changes because their outermost layer of the onion isn't necessarily what's happening in real time right now. For them, they could be 6, 7, 8, 9 years deep, and their outermost layer of their onion is not what we're all experiencing today in the here and now. You know, it's very common. People with dementia lose somewhere between 20 and 60 years of their life over time, sometimes more than that, depending on how long they live through their dementia process. So their sense of reality changes based on the way the progression of their disease happens.
So as we go through this, I'm gonna highlight the tool, right? Because we're gonna get a lot of content and I wanna be okay, this is where you listen, this is the tool. So when we talk about this onion and what's left as they progress, what can help with those positive days is knowing where they're at, right? So that's a tool. But talk a little bit about that. That has to be hard it's gonna take some time to talk to them and try to figure out where in their life they're at.
Correct. And part of the, part of the process of being able to develop that is to know and understand, first of all, they do not retain or have short-term memory. So most everything they're gonna relate to, everything they're gonna talk about is gonna be those things from their long ago past. It's that long-term memory that stays intact until the very end almost. And so as they go through this process that we call regression or retrogenesis, if you will, they kind of do this reverse aging process based on their sense of reality. So frequently it's kind of trying to figure out at any given time where are they at in that process and trying to determine what does that mean in terms of their sense of reality and how do I relate to that.
So that has to be difficult because you have some loved one. Let's say it's my spouse who has dementia. So let's say I've been with my spouse for over 20 years. So I can kind of catch where they're at, right? Because I've been on that journey with them. But what if kids are involved and other people who maybe haven't been there in that journey? Is that where you change from thinking this is my dad to now I got to just be a friend? How does that work?
Okay, so one of the misnomers I think that people associate with dementia, or one of the negative things that negative messaging that people put out there, is that, oh man, your dad or your mom has dementia, so that means they're going to forget you. They're not going to know who you are anymore. And what I want to say to people is that there's a difference between recognizing you and remembering and knowing you. Those are two different things, okay? So because of the way reality changes, because of the way we have to learn to walk in that person's truth, in that person's sense of reality, they may not recognize you as Christine, my adult daughter, but I have not lost my memory of having a daughter named Christine necessarily. Now, based on my sense of reality, I remember when my dad was going through this, and I would go to visit him, and he would get out the scrapbooks of family pictures that they had, and he would show me this picture of this cutesy, blonde, curly-haired little girl, and he would talk to me all about his daughter, Debbie, and he would tell me stories about things that I had done, or, it was interesting because I learned a lot of things about myself I didn't know until then. But he always remembered that he had a daughter, Debbie. He always remembered that he had an attachment to that daughter. But in real time, in the here and now, he didn't necessarily know I was his daughter, Debbie. He knew me. He knew he loved me. He knew we had a connection. I remember him telling me, I always know when you come by your smell. Okay, and he would tell me, you have a very special scent. I love how you smell, kind of thing. So even when they don't recognize you per se, in real time, in terms of how they're connected or relate to you in that moment, they will always know you. They will always remember you at some level.
So another tool that you talk about is using universal responses. So what is that?
So one of the things that we have a tendency to do as caregivers is we have this overwhelming desire to want to help, right? That's what we were created to do. We think our role is to fix things and help things and bring everybody along, and that by trying to bring people back into the here and now through what we call reality orientation, we think that's a therapeutic, beneficial thing to do. But the problem with that is if you are trying to bring somebody into the here and now and you're using reality orientation, remember that what's happening to the brain in that moment in time, it keeps them from having the ability to process, understand that reality, store it, and later be able to retrieve it when they need it or they are confused about something. So because of that, what happens is, let's say my layering of my onion is back to a time when I was 12 years old, okay? So if I'm well into middle or moderate stage dementia and I think in my head that I'm a 12-year-old and I don't recognize I'm an 89-year-old guy, and I go, Christine, where's my mom? I can't find my mom, right? Now, if we use reality orientation tells us we should tell Christine, well, honey, you're 89. Your mom and dad have been dead for, 60 years. The problem with that is, although that's factual, for the person living with dementia who's going through this altered reality or living a new truth, if you will, the way they receive that information is not as an 89-year-old. They hear that as a 12-year-old would hear it. So I want you to think about how traumatic that would be for a 12-year-old to hear that their mom and dad are not living. And so reality orientation, it tends to re-traumatize and re-cause people stress and distress every time we try to reorient them to the here and now based on whatever their question or confusion is about. And the other difficulty is because they don't have short-term memory, they cannot retain that information. So each time you tell it to that person, it's like they're hearing it for the first time over and over and over again. So when we talk about universal responses, it's about learning as a caregiver and understanding how in this moment can I best support my loved one's sense of reality or whatever their truth is in that moment. So if you know what mom was all about always, and what were the things that typically she would do, we encourage people to talk about using what we call universal responses, things that kind of cover a multitude of things, if you will, when I'm looking for something that doesn't exist anymore. So for example, if I say, Christine, where's my mom? A universal response might be, oh, well, your mom went to church to help decorate the church today, if that's something we know that mom typically did in the past. You might say, oh, you know what? I forgot to tell you. I talked to your mom this morning. She went to get groceries. She's going to be back later, kind of thing. And so those universal responses that kind of cover what you're doing, it's what we call therapeutic truth. And I have people frequently, the first time they hear this concept, is that, well, I'm not going to lie to them. Well, the issue with dementia is that what you're doing is about identifying in this moment in time with the person you're caring for, how do I provide the most loving, supportive thing I can say or do in this moment, okay? Yeah. So it's not about you, it's about this individual and what is it that I need to hear in this moment to be okay. If I'm fretting and I'm worried and I'm anxious because I don't know where my mom is, then the most loving, supportive thing you can do is reassure me in that moment in time that it's okay, that mom knows where I'm at, that you know now where mom is, and things are going to be okay.
And that has to be hard because probably by the time where you guys are in your relationship when this happens, you're used to, being able to make it about you, to make it about them, and have this mutual. So when you're working with someone with dementia, that's a hard concept to have to switch on and say, okay, from here on out, it's not about you, and that's hard. That really is difficult.
And the thing that's difficult is that the entire time this person is living and walking through this dementia journey, it is continual evolution. It is continual change. Yeah. And so what you have to start to grasp and understand as a caregiver is that it gets down to a point where you have to ask yourself, do you have the courage to let go of what was and embrace what is? Because that's a constant thing you're going to experience on this journey, is that evolution of who that person is, what their sense of truth is, what their life path is going to be like, what you're going to experience with them, because that is continually a process of change.
And I do want to say there is, and we've talked about this in our podcast, a grieving element to that. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. Everybody goes through that, and you have to work through it. And so we have some podcasts on that, and you guys have such amazing resources because as you sit here and listen, it's so much easier said than done, and we understand that. Something that you say here, don't commit to something that you cannot deliver on in that moment.
Yes. So when we talked about therapeutic truth and what is the most loving, supportive thing you can say in that moment, you don't ever want to give a response that puts you in a position where you have to deliver something you cannot. So for example, if I'm looking for my mom, you're not gonna say, oh, well, I think she's outside, let's go look for her. Because you're not gonna find mom, right? So you have to be very cautious about how you make a statement, what it is you're typically committing yourself to, because you don't want to put yourself in a corner where you've made a commitment to produce something that's just not possible.
So with the focus of creating more positive days ahead, as a caregiver, how can you have your loved one help you, right? We talk about a lot of times these individuals want to stay busy, and sometimes you may feel like, well, they can't do this. Well, you may have to find something they can do, and that can be a little difficult.
Yeah, so one of the things that we have a tendency to do as caregivers, when we hear that diagnosis of dementia, we start to think about all the things that now my loved one can't do. And what I tell people all the time, you have to start changing your frame of reference. You have to start changing the way you think about your loved one. And instead of saying they can't do this, start to look at, okay, maybe they can't do all of this piece, maybe they can't do this complete task, but what piece of this can they do? One of the things people with dementia love to be is helpful. All of us have to have a sense of value and purpose in our day. And so anything and everything that you can find for them to help you with or to be a part of, that gives them that sense of, being important and being able to contribute and give back. Because they're just terrified of being different. They're terrified of not being normal. Probably one of the greatest stressors we put on a person living with dementia as a caregiver is expecting them to be normal.
Yeah.
Whatever that is. I don't know that any of us know what normal is.
No.
Anyway, but to be mainstream, if you will, in terms of how all the rest of us, have a sense of reality. And so it really is about thinking about, I tell people all the time, think about what was the person good at before? What were the things they did really well? Those are the things that you want to continue to try to get that person involved in and connected to and being helpful.
And I think too, remembering that task may not be perfect, and that's okay. It's like, just give the task, and
That's
whatever it is what it is.
That's one of the things that when it comes, going back to what I said earlier about embracing the way things are now, what is versus what was.
Yeah.
You got to let go of expectations, and it has to be about the experience and what the loving, supportive act is versus what the outcome is. I remember going to see a little lady who had asked me to come and assess her husband, and I got to the house, and she was just frantic when I walked in, and she said, oh my gosh, he's destroyed my kitchen, So I went and walked into the kitchen with her, and her husband had gotten up during the night and had taken every box and bag of everything she had in her cabinets and opened it and dumped it out in piles all over her kitchen counter. And she was just frantic because she just kept focusing on, he's made such a mess, I can't believe what he's done. Why did you do this? It's like asking a little kid, why did you do this? They don't know, because. Well, I spent some time with the gentleman, got his wife to sit down with us, and we started talking, and I remember standing in the kitchen, and he was standing beside me, and I said, man, Ralph, this is quite an accomplishment. I said, you must have worked a long time last night to do all of this. I said, this is pretty impressive. I said, boy, I just don't even know what to say about this. And he looked at me and he said, well, I am who I am. I was trying to be helpful. And he said, I heard her say yesterday she needed to clean her kitchen cabinets out. And that's when he woke up in the middle of the night, that's what he remembered. And that's what he was trying to do. So from her perspective, it was a horrible mess, right? But I tell people all the time, one of the secrets to success when you're trying to be a caregiver for somebody with dementia is, learn to compliment, to praise, and compliment some more.
Yeah.
Because if you can keep things in a very positive note, and that's hard to do when you're looking at that mess all over your kitchen cabinet, your kitchen counter, and you know it's going to take you 2 hours to clean all that up. It's hard to say thank you for doing that, right? But because they walk in a different sense of reality, they can never understand or comprehend that what they did was just create a horrible mess for you. He was so proud that he did something so helpful for her and worked so hard all night long to do that.
And I think what's hard is that this too can go against your personality so much. And the only thing I can relate to this moment is having a 2-year-old. Me, I'm like, let her draw wherever. Yes, girl, like live your life. Dave, no. So I think that's the hardest part too, is if you have the personality type that c'est la vie, we'll deal with it, that's great. But when you see this mess and it kind of goes against what you're used to, that can be really hard in that moment to say, c'est la vie, right?
That's exactly right. And one of the really difficult things about caregiving is trying to balance the burden of what being a caregiver is and then dealing with all this additional stuff that comes with it. But the only way to survive this journey is to start to let go of some of those things that you just can't change.
Yeah. When Deb, no, you're not my husband. When Deb and I were going through this rundown, she said this to me that we were about to go through. So this is what sparked my ears. She said apparently there are some magic words that work every single time. So we're going to go over these magic words. So if this is the time to take out your pen and paper, this is probably, so where did the idea of these magic words that always seem to work come from?
So first of all, let me just clarify, I wish there was some magic words that you could say that would work every time.
She told me, I don't know, they work.
That's not
99.9.
But there are phrases that you can use that will help de-escalate a difficult situation. One of the things that happens for people with dementia is that in our desire to want to make things right for people and keep life ordered and trying to keep things on track, we have a tendency to put expectations on people with dementia that are not realistic. And because of that, we put people in a position where they feel like they have to be defensive, right? And so I tell people all the time, think about if you were this person's best friend, what would you need to hear from your best friend in that moment in time? People with dementia are terrified. They are terrified they're going to make a mistake. They're terrified they're not going to be able to get their thought out and communicate that to someone else. They're terrified that people are going to recognize that they're not the same, that they're not normal. They're terrified that somehow you're going to stop loving them because they're different. And so one of the things that's critically important as a caregiver is for them to hear from you that you've got this, that you're in this together. You're not going to abandon them. Those magic words are things like, don't be concerned. I'm going to take care of this. It'll be fine. Things like, you know what? You and I, we make a great team. We're going to figure this out. We're going to get through this together, magic words like, this is not your fault. It's okay. It's okay. All those things that help alleviate that fear and that anxiety, and, you got to learn to laugh at yourself. You got to learn to laugh at the circumstances and be okay. The other thing we talk about is, blaming someone else or something else. Take the heat off yourself. I said, over the years, multiple years that I've done this work, I can't tell you how many things I've apologized for, how many things I've accepted responsibility for that I had nothing to do with. But it's important for the individual living with dementia to know that it's okay, and that you get it. So, you know, I think about examples where, you know, I've said to people, well, you know what, I forget that stuff all the time too, you know, or you know, the old, well, you never told me I had a doctor's appointment, right? I'm going, you know what, you are absolutely right. I totally forgot to tell you, I am so sorry. I can't even believe I did that. I'm so sorry. And taking the heat and the judgment off the person living with dementia. Because that automatically puts that person in a position of being defensive and feeling like somehow they've got to defend the fact that they aren't aware or couldn't remember it or lost that thought, if you will.
Yeah. Which then leads to what we're going to talk about next. Another thing that can help is realizing that you are going to be 100% wrong all the time, right? That's the bottom line.
So I tell people all the time, when you know you're living with someone with dementia, I tell people it's like, if you think about the fact that once your loved one has that diagnosis, they live on the moon and you live on the earth, and the laws of gravity no longer apply to them. Right? And so if you think about it that way, the reason I use that example is from a practicality standpoint, it starts to help you understand you have to change the way you approach things with your loved one now. So you have to be the person that puts on the anti-gravity boots, the oxygen, the helmet, the spacesuit, so you can go to be where they are. They can't come to where you are. This disease changes that for them. They no longer have the ability to alter their sense of what their living truth is in this moment. So the only thing we can do is change how we approach or react to that new reality, that new truth. And so the other thing that happens with dementia is people lose the ability for rational thought. And if you've ever tried to argue with your loved one who has dementia, you all know that reality. There is no changing their mind. They don't have the ability to rationally think through and understand decisions that they make, consequences for action. All of that changes because of the way the disease process is.
And then if you stop correcting them, right,
Yeah.
if you just find them where they are, you remove any of the arguments and the
That's right.
fighting and just continue these positive experiences.
I tell people all the time, you know, someone can't resist if you don't insist.
Yeah.
Nobody can push back if you don't push,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so you have to learn to stop correcting them. And, you know, when it comes to that kind of situation and you're trying to determine, is this worth fighting for or not?
Yeah.
You know, you kind of have to ask yourself. I tell people, think about these three things, these three questions when you're encountering some kind of difficult response from a loved one. Ask yourself these three questions. Number one, is it harmful? If this person does it, is it harmful to them? Okay. Number two, is it harmful to anyone else? Okay. And then number three, whose problem is this, really? Is this about something that you have an issue with versus something that, you know, so they want to put on the same shirt 3 days in a row. Okay. So is that going to harm them to do that? Is it going to harm you to do that? I don't know. Maybe they'll be a little stinky. I don't know. It depends on, I guess, how long the shirt's been on and whether it's a hot, sweaty day or not.
Right.
But in the end, you have to ask yourself, is it worth the anger, the tears, the emotional meltdown that potentially it could cause if you push to make this person, force this person to be where you want them to be in that moment. You know, what we're talking about tonight is not that kind of moment. We want people to learn and find the ability to find joy in the moments, because when you're living with somebody with dementia and they've lost the ability for so many of those layers that we talked about, sometimes all you have left is the moment, not the years and years and years. That's not where they're living. They're living in the moment at this moment in time. So it really is about finding the ability to experience joy in the moments. You know, there's going to be lots of moments on this journey. You want to find as many that are filled with joy as possible.
You have a great example of sometimes this means you just got to play along and jump in the bathtub.
Yeah. So, so one of the things I experienced early on was I had a lady who had telephoned me and asked me to come and visit her husband. She wanted an assessment done and said, you know what, he just is doing some goofy things and I'm not sure what's going on with him, and would you come meet him and take a look at him and just visit us. And so I had made arrangements to go to the house and visit them and spend some time with her husband. And so I got to the door and I knocked on the door, and as I'm knocking on the door whips open. This little tiny lady is standing there just sobbing uncontrollably, and she's like, you have to get him out, you have to get him out, he won't get out, he won't eat lunch, he won't get out. I'm like, okay. I'm like, take a deep breath, calm down, tell me what's going on. And so she said, he's in the bathtub, he won't get out of the bathtub. And I'm like, okay. Because usually what I hear is, he won't get in the bathtub, he won't take a bath. Right?
Yeah.
So I she takes me to the bathroom, and I walk to the bathroom, and I walk in the bathroom, and this little guy is sitting inside the bathtub. And he has his little Pro Bass baseball cap on. And he's sitting in the middle of the bathtub, and I'm standing there washing for a little while, and he's going. So I'm watching this for a few minutes. His wife is just in the background sobbing. And I turned around and I said, you know, why don't you go make yourself a cup of tea? I said, leave this to me. And I said, well, we'll get back to you in a little while. And so she went on into the kitchen, and I walked in there and I said, wow, Max. I said, you look like you are having a really good time. And he looks over me and he said, better get in the boat, your feet are gonna get wet. I said, oh, okay. So I stepped over the side of the bathtub and sat on the edge of the bathtub. And he's, you know, casting and reeling in, and I'm looking down at the bottom of the bathtub, and I said, wow, this is quite a haul you've got today. I said, how long have you been at this? He said, ooh, all morning. He said, they're biting good today. I said, well, that's great. I said, I'm so glad to hear that. And I said, so we proceeded to have a whole conversation about what kind of bait he was using, and, you know, did he have any secret lures that he used and that kind of thing. He, you know, we had probably 10, 15-minute conversation about his process of fishing. And I said, you know, boy, you've been at this a long time. I said, I don't know about you, but my stomach's growling. I am really hungry. I think there's a picnic lunch out there in the other room for us. I said, why don't we go get a bite to eat? And he looks at me and he puts the pole down and he goes, yep, that's a pretty good idea. I could use something to eat. I said, all right. So I stood up in the bathtub, and at this point, he grabs the sides of the bathtub and he goes, don't rock the boat. Be careful. I'm like, okay. So, gentleman that he was, he stood up, stepped out of the boat, gave me his hand, helped me out of the boat. We went to the kitchen, sat down, and had lunch. His wife was just beside herself, and she said, I just don't get it. He just wouldn't get out. Why wouldn't he get out for me? And I looked at her and I said, Hazel, next time, just get in the boat. And that's kind of what all of this boils down to.
Yeah.
is that we spend so much time and energy trying to change people's sense of reality instead of trying to find those. That encounter that I had with him inside the bathtub was such a joyful thing. He got a chance to share all his expertise about his bait and how he picked what lures he used, and who taught him to fish. I remember he told me about his grandfather was the first one to take him fishing. When we talk about finding moments of joy on this journey, those are the kinds of things that we're talking about. It's seizing those moments that might seem totally unrealistic to you and totally goofy, and you go, why the heck does he think he's in a boat when he's in the bathtub? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's factual or not. It's look at the situation and see if you can find the joy in the moment in how you connect, how you can bridge that loved one to some very special piece of their past that brought them happiness and joy. I tell people as caregivers all the time, make yourself a list. Just sit down, have a cup of coffee, make yourself a list of 10 things that you know about your loved one that brought them true joy, that brought them true happiness, and then try to make those things happen in whatever way you can. Think about what are the things that you loved. What are the things that you loved doing together? I remember having a conversation with a spouse who, I said, tell me what's something that you just absolutely love, that just you love to do? And she said, oh gosh, I don't know. And I said, think about what just calms you down? What makes you feel good? And she said, you know what I really like? Ever since I was a little kid, I just liked a really warm, soft, fuzzy blanket. And she said, I just love the way it feels when I wrap it around my body. I said, next time you visit your husband, bring one of those blankets with you and wrap yourselves up together and just sit. Take your socks off, wrap your feet around the soft, warm blanket, and just snuggle. Just be with him. It's creating those, trying to find those simple moments of joy. There is so much difficulty, there's so much suffering, there's so much pain in this journey. It's trying to find your way to those very simplistic moments of joy without all the battles.
Yeah.
Battles are not necessary. Trying to bring somebody in. Now, again, it goes back to those 3 questions I said. If there's something they're doing that's going to harm them or someone else, obviously we have to intervene. They don't have good judgment and reason to understand that. But 99% of the time, that's not the case.
Yeah. We talked a little bit on blame it on something else. Do you want to kind of go back there and expand on that a little bit, or do you think we've touched on that? I'm pretty good at blaming on other people, so I'll just...
So a couple more examples I can give you about that. So I remember I had a little lady who, lived in a healthcare facility where I was working at the time, and I was the floor nurse. And I'd make rounds in the morning, and sure enough, every morning she would have been incontinent during the night, and she would wake up in a wet bed, and I'd be making rounds, and as soon as I would come into her room, she'd jump out of bed and go, I'm telling you, that person came back again last night and poured that pitcher of water in my bed. And I'm like, wow, oh my gosh, I am so sorry that person's doing that to you. I am going to have to track that person down and see if we can stop it. Now that's a perfect example of how dementia folks react to things that change in their life. It doesn't make sense to her that, oh my gosh, I'm an adult grown woman, how could I possibly have wet in my bed?
Right.
It's a dignity issue, it's a privacy issue, it's so important that people with dementia are able to save face. Now, some of us might have said something like, nobody threw water in your bed, you just wet the bed last night.
Yeah.
Well, saying that, giving that kind of factual response automatically puts that person on the defense. And they're going to argue, they're going to fight, they're going to get ugly, and it's why?
Right.
Why? The bed's wet, so what? Let's change it. You know? I remember another time I was actually, this happened in LWC recently, probably 2 years ago or so. I was rounding in one of the houses, and there was a little gentleman who had wet pants on, and he had been sitting in the dining room chair. And I was walking by him, and I could tell he was uncomfortable. He was pulling on his clothes and kind of rubbing where he was wet. And I stopped and I said, wow. I said, I am so sorry. You know, I dumped a whole pitcher of water on this table just a few minutes ago, and I thought I cleaned it up, but obviously I must have missed some water on your chair. I am so sorry. I know you're uncomfortable. Let me help you get changed so you're comfortable. Right? Nothing ever said or done that made him feel wrong.
Embarrassed.
Or embarrassed, right? And so sometimes it's figuring out what can you say in this moment that's going to help this person save dignity, save face, not be embarrassed, and be comfortable. Because as soon as we say, oh my gosh, you're wet. You sat here and wet. Why didn't you tell me you had to go to the toilet? The toilet's right there. We could have gone to the bathroom.
Right.
Now it becomes this huge battle and argument, and the whole time this person's going, I didn't wet my pants. Somebody dumped water on me, right?
Right.
Just avoid that whole battle. Just, you know, I tell people all the time, if you know whatever response you're getting ready to give is going to create a defensive posture on the other side, just don't go there. So it reminds me of a little cartoon I read just recently where a gentleman had gone to his doctor and he said, Doctor, I broke my finger in 2 places. And the doctor looks at him and goes, well, then just don't go to those places anymore.
Yeah.
It's that same kind of mindset that if you know in advance it's going to cause a defensive reaction, just don't go there.
Yeah.
Find another way.
And of course, in a perfect world, right, we'd be able to do that every time, but there is feeling overwhelmed. You live this every day. Sometimes you just have had enough, and that's really difficult, right?
It is.
We talk a little bit about how your memory changes, but these emotions that you feel don't, right? They're still in there. You talk about knowing you have a kid, you knowing that's your son or daughter, you can feel it, but you can't put your finger on it. So when it comes to those with dementia, tone is a huge deal.
Yeah, so what's one of the primary considerations you have to have as a caregiver is not just what you say, but how you say it. One of the things we know research has shown over and over and over again is that people with any kind of a dementia process tend to be more sensitive to nonverbal communication than they are to verbal communication. Another thing that we know is although people with dementia lose memory, short-term memory, people retain what we call emotional memory. So although people may not remember what you said or what you did, they will always remember how you made them feel. People with dementia don't operate on thought processes like the rest of us. They operate on emotional decision making. They operate on how things make them feel. And so everything they interpret is going to be through that lens in terms of how does it feel to me? How does this person make me feel? How you look to me, how you feel to me. That's going to dictate how I react to you.
So it's just staying positive. And you said less is more as well.
Yeah, so the more progressed an individual's dementia gets, the more difficult it is for me to process a lot of words, a lot of information. Many of you have heard me talk before about breaking things down, making things simplistic. Start with just one step at a time. When you overwhelm somebody with dementia with too much information, rather than tell you, I don't understand or I can't do that, they're just going to not try. Or they're going to get really uncooperative or say, get out of here, I don't have to do what you tell me, kind of thing.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So, sorry. I have that cold like everybody else does. When you communicate, you talk about thinking back to that long-term memory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when we talk about that, it's about, thinking back to what are those things that were important to your loved one's life 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Those are going to be the things that they keep, that retain memory and help them kind of be able to attach or connect to whatever it is they're experiencing.
Another tool is to think about how you can make them feel valued.
Yeah. And so going back to what we said earlier about thinking about what gave this person's life purpose and meaning all the years prior to now, it's learning to go back to those same kinds of things. We've talked about a lot of information tonight, a lot of tools. I want to introduce you all before we close to this book. It's called Creating Moments of Joy. And it's written by a woman by the name of Jolene Brackey. She is just phenomenal as an author and really has an incredible understanding of what it's like to walk this journey. She does a great job talking to family caregivers as well as professional caregivers in this book about a lot of the things that we've talked about tonight. But a lot more. We can't fit everything in this one session tonight. But I really want to encourage you, if you're looking for a really helpful book, the thing I love about this book is it's not a book that you have to sit and read from front to back to get what's in it. You can go back and forth between chapters, read the chapter that's relevant for whatever the issue is that you're dealing, and it's going to give you all kinds of great helpful information about it. So I just want to encourage you all to take a look at that. It's available, I know, on Amazon. You can get them used, you can get them new, but I really want to encourage you all to look at that. I had a person ask me one time, when you talk about creating moments of joy, I really struggle with that whole concept. And she's like, where is God in all of this dementia stuff? Where is God in what I'm experiencing? And I remember having a conversation with her and helping her understand. I said, people with dementia forget, but God does not forget. He sees the suffering and pain of his people from the inside out and makes it his own. Faith, when we talk about faith and how faith can help us get through the challenges of this journey, it's important that we understand faith is not about standing and waiting for God to reverse or cure this disease process. We live in a broken world where bad and difficult and painful things happen all the time. What faith is, from my perspective, and when I look at all of you as caregivers, faith is leaning in to what is before you, and it's asking God to help us in that journey find those moments of joy, to try and get beyond all of the negative, all of the difficult that happens. And, remember, each one of us as human beings have been created in the image of God, dementia or no dementia. So know and understand your loved one is precious and is held close to God and his heart. And as difficult as this journey is, I know he will not abandon you in the midst of this. So I hope tonight's been helpful. God bless you all, and thanks for coming. And Patrick, you have anything you want to close with? Okay. Have a good evening.